Hello everyone, JT here. I'd like to take a few minutes to make a quick video on some tools and techniques that I've learned along the way to help make you a more accurate woodworker. So I have been a weekend woodworker for, probably at least 25 years. And over that time, I've made a bunch of projects, a lot of small little projects for gifts and such, but then I've also made some pretty extensive projects like a complete bedroom set, entertainment center. I made a dining room table with chairs, and just recently I finished up a project of making all new cabinets for my kitchen. So over the years, I've learned some techniques to help make your accuracy better, so you have better projects when you're done. So when I first started, I didn't think too much about accuracy. I thought, well, if I have a good tape measure like this, that would be good enough. Well, that approach worked okay for some of my simple projects, but didn't seem to cut the mustard when I started making bigger projects that had some complicated joinery like mortise and tenons and also dovetails and such. Initially, I kind of thought, well, maybe I need some better power tools, but quickly found out that that wasn't always the answer, because many times I found even the new tools weren't adjusted perfectly from the factory, so they didn't make perfect results when I used them. So I kind of figured out along the way that in order to make accurate projects, you really need a way to measure that accuracy and have the right tools to do that. Because without that, you're just guessing and you're going to have less than stellar results. So I'd like to start out with showing you some of these tools that I've been using. So this first one doesn't sound very complicated, but it's really some of the baseline of what you need to make accurate results. It's just an accurate way of marking your pieces before you cut them. So there are different types of tools to use for marking your pieces of stock. When I first started out, I was just using a plain old school pencil, but this really didn't leave the best results, because depending on how sharp it was, it'd either make a thin line or a thicker line, and then when I went to cut, I had to figure out, well, where do I want to cut to, the inside of that line or the outside or what have you. So I stopped using these school pencils. Good option is also mechanical pencil. Well, there's different kinds you can get with different thicknesses. Now this is one from Rockler, but it's got a wide lead in it, which is okay for construction type projects, but you really don't want that type of wide lead when you're making joinery. So this mechanical pencil here, it's got a 0.7 millimeter, and it makes a pretty accurate line. You can get smaller, like I think 0.5, but then you got to be careful when using that, because it will break real easily and you're going to be constantly replacing your lead. So to even get better than this, you can use a marking knife. And this is a marking knife that I have, and it's very good for making joinery, because you can use that small thin little knife to have a very accurate line. So if I want to come here and make a line, you can see I got a nice accurate line there. Another option, and this one is very also useful for making joinery, is what's called a marking gauge. So basically this is has measurements on this rod here. I got inch on one side and metric on the other. And on the end here is this little brown cutter. Gotta be careful because that's pretty sharp. What you do is you set your dimension here, and then this is a fence here, and you use this and you run it along the side of your stock and make a line that you can cut to. Okay, this one takes a little bit of skill to use. So many times you got to go back and forth a few times so you can see it, depending on how hard you press. The one advantage of this is if you're going to be doing multiple pieces with the same dimension, once you have this set, you can use it to make your measurement and make your line all at the same time. So like if I wanted this on all sides, it's set to the right dimension. I can just come here and do it here, come here and do it on this side, and then all the measurements should be the same. Then if I have a second piece, I can make the same measurements there. So these are some tools to help make your lines and your mark more accurate. The next thing kind of goes along with that is having a ruler. So like I said, when I first started out, I was just using this big old tape measure, and it works good for making, you know, long dimensions and stuff. But when you're trying to mark out something like on the end here for a tenon or something, it's very hard to try to hold it on here and balance it here. And then, you know, you got to hold this heavy tape measure, and then you got to get your pencil here and you want to measure a 1/4 inch and make sure this is square and everything. It's just awkward to work with. So a couple different options. You can use a ruler like this, and I have several of these with different lengths. What you do is you set your dimension here, tighten up this fence, and then now you can use it to mark that dimension on your piece of stock. So I have it set to a 1/4, I have it there, so it makes it easy versus trying to balance that heavy tape measure. Kind of go along with the ruler, you can also use mark measurements with a square, and then also make sure that they are 90 degrees to whatever surface you're going to measure from. So there's many different types of squares. You have your handy combination square, which I probably use the most. You have this rafter square, which is probably more used for construction, so I don't use it a lot in fine woodworking. And then you have a normal little square here. This one's really good for making joinery and stuff because it's small and easy to handle. And then you also have a couple specialty squares. You have this one here, and then like this one is kind of a homemade square, which I use for making glue ups. It's kind of a clamping block and square at the same time. So if I'm making like a cabinet and I want to make sure all sides are 90 degrees when I glue it up, I clamp one side to here, clamp one side to here, and then do that on the other 3 sides, and then when I'm done, then I know everything is nice and square. This one here is useful for transferring measurements from one side to the other side. Now, like I said, you could use the marking gauge for that, but if you don't have one, if you have this measurement here, you can mark multiple sides at once. So come here, come here. Now you have all of them at the same dimension. So this is kind of a new one I just got a little while ago. Haven't used it a whole lot yet, so kind of getting used to it myself. So next thing I want to go over are a caliper. So this has been probably one of the best tools I bought for my woodworking. Now most people say, well, caliper, that's probably more of a metalworking type of a measuring tool. Well, yeah, it's used a lot in metalworking, but when you need accurate results for woodworking, like specifically when you're doing your joinery, nothing can beat the accuracy of this. Well, maybe other than a micrometer, but for woodworking, I think Caliper is really good. You can kind of use it 3 different ways. You know, you can use it for measuring. Here's like a setup of a tenon I made. If you want to measure the thickness of the tenon, you can measure it that way. If you want to measure, you can also use it to measure the inside of something. So like if I want to measure the slot width on this, you can use these other ends and measure the slot width. Okay. And then finally you have this end on it that you can measure depths. So if you want to measure like the depth of this tenon, you can come here and put this down here, measure that, so you can see the depth there. So very versatile tool and will really help step up your game when doing joinery. Okay, so let's go over to the table saw here, and I want to show you a couple other tools that I've used. Okay, so over here, I found out that the tools that you use are not only important for measuring the accuracy of the pieces you cut, but for also measuring the accuracy of the power tools you use to cut those pieces. So unless you have an accurate way of measuring to make sure your tool is lined up, you're gonna not get the most accurate results that you want. So one tool I've found that's very useful here is this digital angle finder. And it's used just to basically get a measurement on the angle of things. So one thing I use it a lot is, so on my miter gauge, a lot of times you need to make sure that, is it set 90 degrees when making crosscuts? So you can use this to make and fine tune your miter gauge fence. And set it here, set it against the blade, and there you go, look at 90 degrees exactly. So very good for that. Also use it to make sure when I'm cutting on my chop saw over there that it's producing 90-degree angles as well. Along with that, for measuring angles, I find that this little magnetic angle finder is also very useful. Okay, probably what I use it most for is for making sure that the blade is the angle I want it to be. So what you do here is you zero it out. Okay. Okay, and then what you can do is you can raise your blade up here. And stick it to the blade. Make sure you don't get it on one of the teeth there because it'll throw off your measurements, and then you can see what angle you have on your blade. It's a very useful tool versus using the inaccurate scale on the side of the saw itself. Okay. Another tool I use a lot is for making sure my tools are accurate is a dial indicator. So this is useful for several different things. I use it a lot for making sure my fence is parallel to the blade, and then I also use it if I want to get real accurate and just dial in my fence, move it a few thousandths, or 10-15 thousandths when making a cut. So while you can do that is, I'm going to put it on this side, but normally you would have it on the other side. You would set it here, zero it out. Now if you want to only make it a slightly smaller, go ahead and move it a little bit, whatever you want. And then tighten it up. Now you know I moved it 16,000, so it will be 16,000 smaller than the last time. Okay. Like I mentioned, you can also use it for making sure your fence is parallel to the blade. I made a little jig here. Basically, it's something that goes in this miter track saw or slot, and then I have a little screw here. I'm not going to take it off because it'll take too much time, but it just mounts to this little screw here on the side. So the dial is pushed against the fence. You have the blade all the way down, and then what you can do is you can run this back and forth and see what the measurement is on the front of the fence and the back of the fence, and then dial it in using the little adjustments on the fence to make sure your fence is parallel to your blade. You'll be surprised how much better your saw will cut when that is perfectly aligned. You won't get any burning, and your pieces are going to push through so much easier. Okay. Finally, I think the last item I want to talk about is these setup blocks. So this is a set of setup blocks I have, and they're made at different thicknesses. And what you use them for is if you want to validate something is a certain measurement, you can use these setup blocks. So this is one for 3/4. Now you got to make sure you figure out which way the 3/4 is, and this has a little marking on it. It shows which way the 3/4 is. So let's say I want my blade to be 3/4. So what I do here, bring it up against the table and bring this down, and then you can just kind of stop and feel it a little bit there, and kind of just fine tune it till you have it there at 3/4. So now you know your blade will be 3/4 above the stock. You can also use it for the measurement with your fence. So if you want to make sure that this is 3/4 here, you know, you have your measurements on the side here, but it's not perfect, and it'll change depending on the blade you have in there. So if you want to make sure, you know, you get it close with the ruler on the side of your fence, and then what you can do is you set this in here, and then just kind of tweak it in a little bit till it barely touches. Bring it in there, and now you know that the piece you're going to cut is going to be 3/4. So that's basically it. I know there's other things that are out here, but these are kind of the things that I found most useful and have really helped improve my accuracy. Go ahead, and if you got any questions, leave them in the comments below, and hope this has helped. Thanks.